Welcome to the deep dive. Ready for this? We're going deep into Nepal's education system.
Sounds intense.
It is, but thankfully we have this really cool article by N.D. Lama, and they use this jungle metaphor to explain it all.
Oh, wow, a jungle metaphor.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So the article basically argues that Nepal's education system is like super focused on standardized testing, and it's kind of causing some problems.
I can see how that might be an issue.
Yeah, so like picture this, right?
What?
We got this vibrant jungle, monkeys swinging around, elephants just doing their thing, eagles soaring above it all.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And it's like this perfect picture of diversity, you know? Every creature has its own unique thing it brings to the jungle, right?
Right, yeah.
But then imagine if everyone was suddenly judged based on how well they could climb a tree.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, that's kind of what the author's getting at with this whole standardized testing thing. Is like, instead of celebrating all the different talents and strengths, the system's just laser focused on these tests.
Like the school education examination, or C,
Yeah.
and those big grade 12 exams everyone stresses about.
Exactly. It's like we're forcing a fish to climb a tree and then saying, well, you're not a very good fish because you can't climb.
Yeah, that's a pretty flawed way to judge a fish, isn't it?
Totally. And the article even uses this phrase tunnel vision to describe how this obsession with test scores really limits students' perspectives.
Tunnel vision, I like that, because it really is like they're being forced to look in only one direction, right?
Exactly. And it gets even more interesting. The author talks about egret thinking. You know, those birds that are always focused on catching worms.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean.
So they're so fixated on those worms that they completely miss out on everything else that's going on around them.
So the author is saying that students can get so focused on getting good grades that they might neglect other important things.
Exactly. Like, what about creativity, critical thinking, or even just like exploring things they're actually passionate about?
It's like they're being trained to be these little worm-catching machines.
Right. But what about all the other amazing things they could be doing if they were encouraged to, spread their wings a bit?
It's a valid concern. I mean, if you think about it, this kind of pressure to excel in just one area could actually stifle creativity and innovation, right?
Absolutely. So we've got this picture of a diverse jungle slowly turning into this, like, tree climbing training ground.
Not a very exciting jungle anymore, is it?
Not really. So what are the real-world consequences of all this? How does this focus on test scores actually affect students' lives, like beyond the classroom?
Well, imagine you're a student in Nepal. You're constantly told that your worth is basically determined by how well you do on these big exams.
Yeah, that must be a lot of pressure.
It's immense. It can create so much anxiety, this fear of failure that can be really, really paralyzing.
And it's not just the emotional toll, right? It could limit their opportunities in the future, too.
Oh, absolutely. Like, what if someone is an amazing artist, a gifted musician, but they struggle with math?
Yeah, in this system, it sounds like their talents would go unnoticed.
Exactly. The author uses this really powerful comparison in the article. They talk about students being like hunting eagles versus caged parrots.
Ooh, I like that.
The eagles are free to soar, to explore, to discover their own strengths, right? But the parrots...
Stuck in a cage, unable to reach their full potential.
Exactly. Their wings are clipped by this, exam-centric system.
It makes you wonder what kind of future we're building for these students,
Yeah.
you know? Are we helping them become the best versions of themselves, or are we just churning out a bunch of test-taking robots?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's a question the author definitely tries to answer. But before we jump into the solutions they offer, I think we need to make sure we really understand how deep this problem goes.
You're right. Got to get a good look at this tree climbing competition before we can start talking about how to restore harmony to the jungle.
Exactly. So let's zoom out for a second and think about the bigger picture. We're talking about Nepal, right?
Right.
A country with this incredible amount of cultural and linguistic diversity. But how does that diversity fit into an education system that seems so fixated on just one measure of success?
Yeah, it's almost like taking this beautiful tapestry and just like cramming it into this tiny little box. Doesn't really work, does it?
Nope. And it really makes you wonder, right? Like, are we actually preparing these students for the future? I mean, the world's changing so fast.
Yeah, you need to be adaptable. Think outside the box.
Exactly. And that's what the author's getting at. They're saying this system might actually be holding students back, making it harder for them to thrive in a world that's all about innovation.
Okay, so where do we go from here? The article doesn't just complain about the problems. It actually offers some solutions, right?
Right. The author lays out this multi-pronged approach targeting all these different parts of the education system.
Okay, so like, who are we talking about, and what kind of changes are they suggesting?
Well, a big one is reforming the NEB, the National Examination Board. You know, the folks who run the whole exam system.
Oh, yeah, right.
So they're suggesting giving students more options for how they're assessed, like moving away from this one-size-fits-all model.
So instead of just relying on those big, scary exams?
Exactly. Think of it more like, offering different paths for students to show what they know and what they can do.
I like that.
Yeah, the article even talks about introducing competition from other testing entities, kind of like what happened with, Ncell and Nepal Telecom.
Wait, what was that about? I don't know that story.
Oh, so basically, Ncell was the first private company to challenge the state-owned Nepal Telecom.
Oh, right, right. And that competition really shook things up.
Exactly. It led to better service, more innovation. So the author's thinking, what if we did the same thing with educational assessments?
That's interesting. So like more options, different ways to prove yourself, different ways to learn.
Exactly. Imagine if students could choose how they wanted to be assessed, based on their strengths, how they learn best. It could be huge, especially for those students who, maybe don't do well in traditional exam settings.
That's a really cool idea. But wouldn't that be like a logistical nightmare? I mean, how do you keep everything fair, make sure all the assessments are good quality?
Those are all good questions. And yeah, the author knows it would be complicated. They emphasize the importance of careful planning, making sure any new assessment methods are top-notch, fair for everyone.
So it's not just about getting rid of the old system, but like thoughtfully building a new one.
Exactly. A system that actually works for all students, not just some.
Okay, so that's the NEB and more options for assessment. What else does the article suggest?
Well, another big one is decentralizing education.
Decentralizing. What does that even mean?
Basically, shifting power away from the central government and giving local communities more say in how their schools are run.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty big change. Why would we want to do that?
Well, think about all the diversity we were talking about. Nepal is a country with so many different cultures, languages, and geographical regions, right? Yeah.
And a centralized system might not be able to handle all of that. Like what works in one place might not work somewhere else.
Makes sense. One size fits all doesn't really work in a place like Nepal.
Right. So by giving local communities more control, you can create educational systems that are, more tailored to their specific needs. What works for students in a remote mountain village might be totally different from what works in, Kathmandu.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, so we've talked about changing the exams, giving local communities more power. What about the teachers? What's their role in all of this?
Oh, teachers are absolutely crucial. They're the ones on the front lines, right? And the article is all about giving them more power, too.
Like, what would that look like?
So instead of just teaching to the test, they'd have more freedom in how they evaluate students. Less rote memorization, more focus on the whole picture.
So, like, assessing things like creativity, problem solving, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And also things like collaboration, communication, those all-important life skills. Yeah. So much more than just memorizing facts and spitting them back out on a test.
Right. It's about developing well-rounded individuals, not just test-taking machines.
I love it. But I can already imagine some people pushing back on all of this, like those who are really, really into standardized testing. How do we deal with them?
Well, the author didn't say we should get rid of standardized testing entirely.
Yes.
They acknowledge that it can be useful, for gathering data, making sure everyone's on the same page, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The point is balance. You don't want it to completely dominate the whole system.
So it's about finding a way to integrate it into a more holistic approach.
Exactly. Give teachers the freedom to use different assessment methods, like, projects, portfolios, even peer evaluations.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the system itself. But what about the people involved, like the parents and the students?
That's a really important point. The author emphasizes that we need a shift in mindset, not just among educators and policymakers, but among parents and students, too.
So like changing how we view success, what it means to be a good student.
Exactly. For parents, it's about letting go of that pressure cooker mentality, where everything's about getting into the right college or the best job.
Yeah.
It's about encouraging their kids to explore their own passions, to be themselves.
And to define success on their own terms.
Absolutely. And for students, it's about recognizing that they have the power to shape their own learning,
To be in control of their own journey.
Exactly. It's about ditching that caged parrot image and embracing the hunting eagle spirit.
Ooh, I like that.
It's about encouraging them to be curious, to take risks, to think outside the box, to see learning as this exciting adventure.
That is so inspiring. But how do we actually make this happen, though? I mean, changing mindsets is hard. It's like ingrained in our culture.
Yeah, it's a big challenge for sure. And before we get into that, we should probably talk about technology.
Oh, right. The article mentions that too, right? Like, students should use technology to go beyond the traditional ways of learning.
Exactly. And it's interesting because technology can be both, well, a blessing and a curse when it comes to education.
Okay, how so?
Well, on the one hand, it's kind of fueled this whole obsession with data and testing. But on the other hand, it can also be a powerful tool for breaking free from those limitations.
So before we went to, well, not really a break, I guess, since this is a podcast.
Right.
But anyway, before that, we were talking about how to like shake things up in Nepal's education system, move away from all that standardized testing stuff and get to a better way of doing things. And now we're talking tech.
Yeah.
So you were saying how tech can be a bit of a double-edged sword in education.
Totally. It can feed that obsession with data and testing, but it can also blow the whole thing wide open in a good way.
Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah.
How could tech actually help create a better system? One that's, more in harmony, more fair for everyone.
Well, imagine if we could use tech to personalize learning.
Personalized learning, okay.
So instead of everyone following the same exact curriculum, each student gets their own learning journey, one that's tailored to their needs, their style of learning, all of that.
So like instead of everyone trudging through the jungle on the same path, they each get their own custom-designed map.
Exactly. And think about this, tech can also help us reach students who wouldn't normally have access to good education.
Oh, right, like students in those remote areas of Nepal, I bet.
Yeah. Think online learning platforms. You can suddenly bring education to those students no matter where they are.
That's amazing. And let's not forget how tech can help students unleash their creativity.
Oh, absolutely. Suddenly they're not just consuming information, they're creating stuff.
Yeah, like what?
Video editing, 3D modeling, collaborating on projects online.
Yeah.
The possibilities are endless. It's like instead of just following existing paths through the jungle, they get to build their own.
Love that. But at the end of the day, tech is just a tool, right?
Yeah.
It all comes down to how we use it.
Couldn't agree more. We have to be smart about integrating tech into education, make sure it's actually benefiting everyone.
So it's not just about throwing more tech at the problem. It's about using it strategically to actually address the issues we've been talking about.
Exactly. And I think that brings us back to that idea of like a fundamental shift in mindset. We can change the tools, sure, but we also got to change how we think about education in the first place.
Right. So what's the big takeaway here? What can our listeners learn from this whole jungle metaphor about, nurturing those diverse talents, making sure everyone has a chance to shine?
Okay, well, first off, let's remember that standardized testing can only tell us so much.
Yeah.
If we're only focused on what we can easily measure, we're going to miss out on a whole lot of potential.
Like that egret with its worms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Second, we have to remember that everyone learns differently.
Right. Cookie cutter education is a no-go.
Education should be about embracing everyone's unique talents and styles, just like that diverse jungle. And third, let's use technology to make things better. Personalize learning, give more people access, get those creative juices flowing, but let's do it in a way that benefits everyone, not just a select few.
Absolutely. And lastly, and this is the big one, education isn't just about grades and test scores. It's about
helping students become well-rounded individuals, people who are curious, adaptable, ready to tackle whatever life throws at them.
Yes, it's about those hunting tigers, ready to pounce on opportunities.
Exactly. And honestly, I think this message goes way beyond Nepal. It's a call to action for everyone involved in education all around the world to rethink what we're doing and how we can do it better.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, think about what we've learned. Think about how you can apply these ideas to your own learning journey, maybe to the education system where you live.
Thanks for joining us for this exploration of Nepal's education system. Remember, every student has the potential to be that hunting tiger. It's just a matter of giving them the chance to shine.
That's a wrap on the deep dive.